We got our friend Jackson Shembekar in the house, and we're going to talk about crypto today.
Absolutely, Brandon. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. All right, so there's been some stuff going on around ApeCoin. Tell me about it.
Yes, ApeCoin, it just released last week, actually, with the brand new Ape DAO. And to break that down, that's a decentralized autonomous organization. And this is a very, very big thing coming up for the Bored Ape Yacht Club. This is a club that was released just in 2021. It's a brand new NFT project. I'm not going to say brand new, actually. It's a very reputable project now at the point, but it's new in the sense that NFTs got hot in 2017, 2018 with CryptoPunks. And the Bored Ape Yacht Club took the NFT world by storm, absolutely killing it. Andreessen Horowitz is valuing this thing at $5 billion and is actually raising money as a VC firm. So this is huge, really big tech. And it's established itself as a blue chip in the community. And for the very first time, now we have a token governance protocol coming out saying that holders and participants in the community can now vote on things, can get access to certain things, and can really do a lot more with this community. So we can see further implementation building on this community. And what I find is very interesting is not only are people making a lot of money in this, is that this access is a private club where you get to actually interact with the community on a further scale. What we had previously was a Discord in which people who owned apes, and I've been over this before, where the only people that own apes are early adopters, rich people, and celebrities, are in this group chat. And essentially it's on Discord, so you have Steph Curry, you now have Madonna, you have Jimmy Fallon, you have people like me, and you have people who are nobodies, and all of them are the same because you own an ape. And that's the biggest thing. Everyone gets to come together and have access to that community. And now we have a coin that has a protocol. And that's very, very interesting because there's a voting mechanism that goes behind that. And I want to touch on this because every ape holder, every mutant ape holder, and every ape holder that had a Kennel Club dog to go with it, and I know that's a little complex, but bear with me. If you owned that NFT and were part of this club and you believed in it and you invested in it, whether that was at the initial price of $220, just $220, or $300,000 yesterday, you were able to collect ApeCoin. And this airdrop was massive, and I remember checking myself when I own 3 apes myself, and I checked and I thought maybe I'll get $3,000, maybe if I'm lucky I'll get $30,000, but it was mind-blowing. I got paid $10,094 ApeCoin per ape. I own 3 ape, and that initial price that I was checking was about $10 to $12. So you guys can do the math, but it was a lot of money.
That's awesome, man.
And I was very excited about that. But beyond that, I get to be a voting member in this community. And following up with that, just yesterday, the Bored Ape Yacht Club then launched a private merch drop, and you could only buy the merch with the ApeCoin. So I thought this was very fascinating. It's coming full circle how a community can actually exist and operate on Web3, and it takes away the power of any third party that wants to govern and regulate this space.
So you're able to buy certain restaurants or food. Where, in other words, where is this accepted, or how can you spend the money?
So for now, the biggest place is going to be the Bored Ape Yacht Club merch store, which is actually very interesting. You can only buy Bored Ape Yacht Club merch, but I do think we're going to shift into different spaces where not only will this be accepted in the metaverse, it's been accepted that it's going to be accepted in the metaverse for land purchases, but also within this ape community, during places where you can gather, you will for sure be able to spend this currency in a wide variety of ways. People are talking about Ape Fest 2022 coming this summer, where the only thing will be accepted is ApeCoin, which is fascinating. Imagine going to something where you have people in real life and dollars will not be accepted, credit cards will not be accepted. The only thing that will be accepted is ApeCoin.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, this is definitely, wow, technology. I mean, there's so many things kind of coming together at one point, and it seems like the timing's right. I mean, over the last, you look at how this all evolved, Bitcoin, Ethereum, whichever coin you're talking about, it evolved from, well, why don't you tell me where it evolved from? I mean, from my take is, and of course, someone who's nowhere near as entrenched as you are, we're talking with Jackson Shembekar, by the way, the crypto kid. If you ever thought about crypto or what is it, how do I get into it, can I he can definitely help you. 813-917-1894, the show hotline. 813-917-1894 is the show hotline. Call or text crypto and we'll put you in touch with Jackson. But what kind of brought on this whole thing? I mean, is it because the government's constantly watering down the dollar, of course, inflation, mismanagement, printing? The Federal Reserve itself is just it's a criminal, it should be a criminal organization, but it's not. I mean, they're printing money, they're they're the best counterfeiters. I played a clip last week with Ron Paul, not Rand, but Ron, saying, yeah, they're just professional counterfeiters. They're printing money all the time.
Absolutely. And the history lesson that goes with this is that's what the Bitcoin inception was all about. This was brought on right after 2008, and everyone knows 2008 because that's when the big recession was, right? This was a response with a community, and it's one of the smartest communities in the world, I believe, and of course I'm biased, but I'm going to say that firmly, because you had a group of people come together and say, the existing system is not right, what the government is doing should not be allowed, we should be able to create our own currency and do it with the smartest people we know.
Yep.
And that, excuse me, that brought on Bitcoin.
Yeah.
That picked up in 2010. It was initially just a joke. It then spiraled into something that's an actual peer-to-peer electronic cash system. It then got picked up by Reddit. People started to use it as tips on Reddit. It was just for fun. It was like, let me send you Bitcoin. There was no value to it, but it was a tip. That's what happens. It was on Reddit, and it was a very big thing. Then we get an initial dollar value assigned because it was traded for 2 pizzas, right? That was 10,000 Bitcoin for 2 pizzas. You can imagine now. I know that's $47 million, but that's what that initial sale was. It gave it an initial price point, and it took off from there. From there, it went to the libertarian community. Then it got involved in the Silk Road. Of course, you had black trade, but my constant argument is that pagers were used for illegal things, right?
Right.
So you shouldn't dismiss things just because they were used for illegal reasons, right?
Right.
And I mean, we could dive into the whole U.S. dollar being used for bad things, right?
Right.
So it got used for all these different things, and then in 2017, it got picked up for the very first time going mainstream.
Yeah.
And that was the biggest thing because the media picked it up, and while they said it was a joke and that it was going to crash, and it even did crash, it continues to come back to light every single year.
Yeah, man, that's what a great summarization. We're talking with Jackson Shembekar here on the Consumer Quarterback Show. I'm your host, Brandon Rhymes, and I want to play a quick clip here before we get too deep into this, and then I want to ask you a question, about government intervention and potential for that. Here is a clip on printing money.
This bill we passed last week or 2 weeks ago in the dead of night that nobody wants to talk about, and clearly no senator is sitting out there going, "Hey, look what I did this." They're all ashamed of it.
Yeah.
But what is that going to do? You're a Milt Friedman guy, particularly monetary policy, and I 1,000% agree, dude. It's about monetary policy and about the flooding of dollars and the spending. Walk us through your analysis. Get about 2 minutes, and then we'll take a break and bring you back.
Yeah, well, as I said last time, no one pays attention to the real economy. The real economy right now is a white corpse laying on the table, dead, right? We've shoved $30 trillion total in debt into the economy, fiscal stimulus over the past years, $10 trillion in federal spending in the last 10 years, $9 trillion on the Federal Reserve balance sheet, $2 trillion in the last year or two of Fed funny money. So we've been shoving blood into that corpse in the form of M2 money supply. And if anybody looks at it, it's just a hockey stick, right? It's relatively flat and it just jumps up through the roof by the Fed. So the Fed's very late. Milton Friedman said back in the 60s when he won the Nobel Prize, there's a year lag on monetary policy. So his theory is about absolutely correct. We start printing, back in 2020, you can see the graph right there. It goes through the roof. And a year later, you get inflation. And the reason you don't have hyperinflation right now is because, as I said, the economy is a white corpse laying on the table. When you shove $10 trillion in federal spending and $2 trillion in money, that thing, if it doesn't create hyperinflation, you don't have an economy.
So Jackson, what's your initial response to, all the printing and the funny money?
For sure. I definitely agree for the most part. I do think that we are going to be far off from hyperinflation. Hyperinflation defined by Colombia as 50% in 1 month. So I don't think we're anywhere near that. You can see countries like Turkey where they're at 44% over 2021. We are nowhere near that. We're still the United States, right? But I do agree in the sense that fiscal policy is a mess. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely horrible. I mean, I'm still 18. I don't know everything about economics, but I do know a lot and more than majority. And so I think that fiscal policy in the sense that we can just print stuff and we're adjusting these rates, and it's not monetary policy, right? It's the government particularly trying to shift the economy, but there's a lag. There's always going to be that delay, and they can't shift things in the right way, right? And so you have Jerome Powell out there with the Federal Reserve, and he's the money man. He tries to create what he wants to do. Mm-hmm. And while he may be a smart guy, I think that that's up to the people to decide. It's not up to one person. Right. Yeah. And so when you get this government just filled up with monetary and fiscal policy, I think the monetary is the right way to go. But I think that either way, you're trying to alter the economy, and it's a self-governing body. And this free hand principle, the invisible hand principle, even though it's almost cliche, I do think it's the right way to go.
Yeah, so, and the challenge is too what you have with the Federal Reserve is that there's nothing federal about it, right? But what the challenge is when we went off the gold standard back in, I believe it was 72, it opened this up to basically these cronies. So you've got the politicians, you've got the elites, you got the Jerome Powells, the Janet Yellens, the Greenspans. Those are all people in the clique. They're in that upper echelon clique. Your Chase Manhattans, your all the different folks that are at the top of that chain. What are they going to do? They're raising rates. They just started raising rates, but for the longest time they're reducing the rates. They're increasing the money supply. It's a tax on the poor. It's a tax on the middle class, hurting the middle class at record numbers. And then meanwhile, what did they do? They went out and took on so much corporate debt. So they were taking on corporate debt. So they're playing the game, and they're in charge of the game. So they're like the quarterback, and they're playing the game. But let's take a quick break. When we come back, I want to ask you a little bit more about what happens if government decides to intervene and has some type of an intervention and says, hey, I'm going to start my own digital currency. What would happen with Bitcoin? How do you see that potentially playing out? And also, the fact that you can mine this crypto coins. You can mine these coins. I know you and James were talking about that prior to the show, so I want to ask you about that. On the flip side of this break, don't go anywhere. Back here on the Consumer Quarterback Show in just a quick minute. We'll be right back. All right, we got Jackson Shembekar in the house, and the Crypto Kid. He's a published author and definitely extensive knowledge, an expert in the crypto space. So it's kind of teasing before the break. What would happen if that's one thing that I've kind of thought in the back of my mind is hey, what if the government says, hey, that's nice and all, you guys started this Bitcoin thing and you've got the Bored Ape Club, but what if the government comes in and says, hey, no, we're going to do our own digital currency? How would that play out?
Yeah, so I'm going to touch on a couple things here. What I want you to think back to is with Bitcoin, you have a big component that they have a leg up on everyone else in the sense that it is CEO free, right? So when you think of who created Bitcoin, the answer is Satoshi Nakamoto. And then you ask, well, who is Satoshi Nakamoto? And the answer is that nobody knows. It's a pseudonymous, basically, character because no one knows. It could be a single guy. It could be anyone. It could be a group. It could be some comp sci people in their basement, right? No one knows who exactly created it. You have a mathematician who is dead now with the name Satoshi Nakamoto. You have Hal Finney, the first receptor of Bitcoin. He's also dead now. You have Craig Wright. That's the alternative argument. And now that one is a little bit skeptical. I'm skeptical myself. Probably wouldn't believe it. He's responsible for the BSV network. But the big thing with Bitcoin is that it is anonymous, right? So Vitalik Buterin, he's the creator of Ethereum, and it's very public, right? And so a big doc on Ethereum is that you have this guy that represents the network and that has power involved, right? And so as distributed as it can get, he needs to relinquish all power for everything to be entirely decentralized, right? And so if the government were to create a currency, what I would say is that you have this massive community of Bitcoin maximalists and people who support Ethereum with decentralized applications, and they're going to say that Bitcoin and Ethereum, even if they're obsolete technology, they're going to say that it's far more efficient than the government controlling their funds, right? And so the flip side of that is that you have full adoption on the governmental side. But if everything is so public and so transparent versus the blockchain on Bitcoin and Ethereum right now that's pseudonymous, if everything's going to be public, I think, and I could be wrong, but I would think that the crypto community would stick with what they know. And my example on this is going to be Libra through Facebook, right? And it's meta now, but I'm going to say maybe a couple of years back now. It almost feels like forever. But Facebook released Libra, right? Facebook is a mammoth of a company.
Yep.
And they released Libra thinking that that's going to be a crypto that is going to dominate. It's going to be a Bitcoin killer. And I remember, I think I actually got asked about it by you maybe last year. And guess what? It was an entire flop, right? Because Facebook didn't know what these geniuses know that created stuff like Bitcoin and Ethereum. And coins flop every day. But the big thing is when you have companies leveraging their existing success into this new space, right? You can argue that that is vertical, what's the word? Vertical
integration?
There it is. Yes, vertical integration over horizontal integration, right?
Yep.
And that is something that these companies with this brand new space just aren't ready for.
Yeah.
And the argument then is that the government will be ready for it, right? And so if the government will be ready for it, I think it's going to take an immense amount of time, and it will be multiple years out. Because if they're going to do it, they're going to do it right? This is the U.S. government we're talking about.
You'd hope so. I don't know about this current administration.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But I think that you're going to have a vast amount of experts that will come in to really take this and try and run with it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that the crypto community is going to be a very, very tough sell But I think that if they're going to do it, we're multiple years out, and I don't think that the government's in a place to do that now.
Yeah.
Think about it. We could
I hope you're
barely
right.
get legislation through Congress right now.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, that we can't even get legislation on Web3, and it takes months and months to do that, I think we're years out of an actual currency.
Yeah, and a lot of the guys in there don't even know what crypto is. You know, if
Exactly.
you really sat down with them and asked them and drilled them on it, maybe their staff understands it, and you know, some of their subordinates. But I doubt they do. And because I've seen different articles and publications about, you know, if there was a digital currency and you go to trade in your American dollars, they're saying, hey, we're moving you completely off of cash, and we're going to then, okay, so if you're a conservative or a patriot, you might get 70% credit, but if you're on the woke side, then you might get 130% credit. You know what I mean? So that's what's scary about a potential move for a government going to a digital currency.
Absolutely, and I think if they were to do so, right? Let's say we're in that space where we're a couple of years out, and they have all the protocols in place, and they have all the code, all the smart contracts are set, right? I think it's going to be a very, very slow shift, if at all, right? Let's say the community gets behind it and everything. You have to think about the actual people that accept and adopt Bitcoin and Ethereum to the full scale right now as it is, right?
Right.
So we are several years out of any mainstream adoption in terms of that. Do I think we're going to get there? Absolutely.
What percent do you think we are right now? Sorry to interject, but you know, through
Yes.
330 or whatever million Americans, what percent are like into Bitcoin?
So we are
kind of...
we're it's actually interesting. If you asked me this question maybe 3-4 years ago, right? And we were at the very 1% of the bell curve, right?
Yep.
But we're actually starting to get to that rising action of the bell curve. We're on that early adopter stage still, I would believe. Other people would argue early majority. I'm going to stay firm with that early adopter because I think we're in that 13 to maybe 20th percentile right now, right? And I want you to visualize a bell curve when you think about that.
Right.
Others would argue that we're at the 30 to 45. And honestly, both are fine. Both are acceptable arguments, right? But I do think we're certainly on the first half, right? And there's going to be the laggards that fall behind, right? And that's with anything, right? Think about just how many people still don't even accept credit cards, right? They think that all forms of debt are bad, right? Versus you could, if you utilize it right, you can get percents back and you can get all your travel and hotels free, right? So there's always going to be that skepticism behind it. But I think that we are still in that early majority or early adopter phase. That'd be my opinion. Yeah,
it's interesting. If you just joined us, we're talking with Jackson Shembekar here on the Consumer Quarterback Show. He's an author. His book is The Crypto Kid. And Jackson, we've got about a minute and a half left or so. How do you want folks to connect with you, and where can they get your book?
My book is going to be any bookstore nationwide, and you can find it on Amazon. It's The Crypto Kid, and the best way to get in contact with me is at Jackson Shembekar on Instagram. Last name is Shembekar.
Yep, Jackson Shembekar. And final thought too, Gary V. You got Gary V. Other celebrities, they're kind of getting in, and talk to me about the celebrity side and how they can influence.
Absolutely. Celebrity influence is huge. I think that there's kind of two sides to this. You have the celebrities that actually know what they're doing, and it's not necessarily them, but it's their publicists, their people behind them, right? But there are good projects out there like V Friends and Gary V. And I'm going to say that lightly because some people are going to say that Gary V is very, very on the fence himself on the ethical side of things. But I think regardless of what he's doing, he's innovating in the space, which is the biggest thing, right? The smart contracts have utility. He is creating things. I think that's good. However, then you have other people in the space, and I'm not going to call names, but you have people that know nothing, and they're buying these NFTs, and they're doing different things because other people are telling them to. And they know nothing about the innovation, and it's all about the hype, and they see the quick cash grabs.
Right.
And I think that's where this community can fall short. But I think that the influence is certainly something good because the big thing that NFT is a household like name now, not necessarily name, but word. That's a big thing. Yeah. People recognize NFT. They might not know non-fungible token. They may not know anything about it.
Yeah.
But people know NFT now. They do. And so I think that's a very big thing.
And we had a real estate deal close here in Tampa that was, kind of a big, in my opinion, it was a PR play, PR stunt type deal. But yeah, it closed in South Tampa, and
Absolutely.
It was a non-fungible token.
You got it.
And and there's ways around it too. We talked to Jenny, who's coming up as well, about sometimes these companies, they'll sell the LLCs and then the beneficial rights, ownership rights of the LLC to escape paying taxes and other things in some cases. Jackson, always a pleasure, man.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
My pleasure. All right.